Broadway producer catches deaf janitor in the act and can't believe what she sees. Catherine Monroe never imagined that working late at the Imperial Theater that Wednesday evening would change her life forever. The sound of piano music coming from the main stage made her stop in the velvet-draped corridor, her heart skipping a beat. It was laughter. Pure, uninhibited laughter from an 8-year-old boy who hadn't spoken a single word in 2 years. Before we ride on, we'd like for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us bring you even more intriguing stories. Now, let's begin. Catherine Monroe was Broadway royalty. At 39, she had produced 12 Tony Award-winning shows, transformed struggling theaters into cultural landmarks, and wielded more power in the theater district than anyone in a generation. But beneath the designer suits and commanding presence lived a woman drowning in guilt. Her son, Elijah, had been standing beside his father when a drunk driver jumped the curb 2 years ago. Marcus had died instantly. Elijah survived without a scratch, but his voice disappeared that day as completely as his father had. Since then, Catherine had thrown herself into work with obsessive intensity, producing back-to-back shows, attending endless meetings, anything to avoid the suffocating silence in her penthouse apartment where her son existed like a ghost. Every therapist, every specialist, every experimental treatment had failed. Elijah moved through life mechanically, his eyes empty, his world soundless by choice. Approaching the stage entrance, Catherine peered through the gap in the curtains and felt her blood run cold. There was Maria, the night janitor she'd hired 8 months ago, standing center stage with Elijah. But that wasn't what shocked her. It was what Maria was doing. The deaf black woman was moving with breathtaking grace, her hands painting stories in the air through sign language and expressive choreography. Elijah stood transfixed, watching her every movement. Maria was teaching him a dance routine, but it was more than that. She was communicating through pure movement, and somehow, impossibly, Elijah was responding. Maria's hands moved with the precision of a conductor, guiding Elijah through positions and gestures. The boy mimicked her movements, and for the first time in 2 years, Catherine saw genuine emotion flickering across his face. Joy, connection, life. But there was something else even more intriguing about that scene. Maria was incorporating theatrical techniques that seemed far too sophisticated for a janitor. She used stage blocking, emotional physicality, narrative arc, all the elements Catherine recognized from professional direction. How could a deaf janitor with no apparent theater background understand the nuanced language of performance at such an advanced level? This mystery disturbed Catherine deeply. Catherine's assistant director, James, appeared in the corridor holding a clipboard. He seemed equally surprised to see his boss still at the theater so late, but his expression softened when he heard the piano music and saw what was happening on stage. "Maria has been wonderful with Elijah," he whispered, approaching carefully. "Since she started bringing him here after her shift begins, your son has been showing signs of engagement we haven't seen since the accident." Catherine turned sharply to James, her eyes blazing with a mixture of emotions she couldn't fully identify. "You knew about this? You knew she was doing this with my son?" James lowered his gaze, clearly uncomfortable. "I noticed some things, yes. But Catherine, look at how present Elijah is. It's been so long since he seemed here." His words struck Catherine like a physical blow. When was the last time she had really looked at Elijah's progress? When was the last time she had spent an entire evening just being with her son instead of reviewing production budgets and casting decisions? The guilt that already haunted her intensified, now mixed with anger directed both at Maria and at herself. At that moment, Maria helped Elijah take a bow, and the boy smiled. Actually smiled. Then, in a voice so soft Catherine almost missed it, Elijah whispered, "Thank you, Miss Maria." The scene shattered something in Catherine's carefully constructed defenses. For 2 years, she had desperately sought something, anything, that would bring her son's voice back. And there it was, happening in her own theater, facilitated by someone she had barely noticed beyond signing paychecks. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more interesting stories like this. Now Catherine would have to decide what to do with this disturbing discovery that would completely change the dynamics of her fractured family. The next morning, Catherine couldn't focus on the production meeting for her upcoming revival. Her mind kept returning to the scene she had witnessed on stage. She dismissed her team early, determined to confront Maria directly. She needed to understand what was happening under her own roof. When she arrived at the theater that afternoon, she found Maria in the orchestra section, methodically cleaning the seats. Maria looked up and immediately sensed something had changed. Even without hearing, she could read the tension in Catherine's posture. "Maria, I need to talk to you," Catherine said, then remembered. She pulled out her phone and typed, "It's about what I saw last night with Elijah." Maria's hands stiffened on her cleaning cloth, her dark eyes flickering with nervousness. She pulled out her own phone and typed back, "Mrs. Monroe, I can explain." Catherine's fingers moved rapidly across the screen. "Explain what? That you're playing theater director with my son without my permission. You're not qualified for that. You're just a janitor." The words appeared harsh on the screen, cutting through the air like a blade. Maria lowered her eyes, her hands trembling slightly as she typed her response. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to overstep. But Elijah seemed so lost." But there was something in Maria's behavior that intrigued Catherine. Despite her apparent submissiveness, she sensed a quiet strength in the woman's posture, as if she was guarding an important secret, something that could completely change the situation if revealed. Catherine typed again. "Where did you learn those techniques? Where does a janitor learn about theater therapy and stage direction?" Maria hesitated for a long moment, her fingers hovering over her phone screen as if struggling internally between revealing the truth or staying silent. Finally, she typed, "My daughter. She was born deaf like me. She stopped communicating entirely after being bullied at age 7. So I learned everything I could about using theater and movement to help her express herself." Catherine read the message, then looked up at Maria with new attention. Maria lifted her gaze, and for the first time, Catherine saw a burning flame of determination in her eyes. She continued typing. "I spent 12 years developing methods to reach her through performance, through movement, through the language of the body when words fail. My daughter Sierra performs in deaf theater now. She's thriving." The revelation struck Catherine like lightning. Her anger began to mix with something more complex, reluctant respect, and also a sharp stab of shame. This woman had managed, with creativity and dedication, to achieve what Catherine, with all her resources and connections, had not been able to provide for her own son. "You had no right to make decisions about my son's therapy without consulting me," Catherine typed, though her message had lost some of its initial harshness. "You're absolutely right, ma'am," Maria agreed, lowering her eyes again. "But Elijah was fading away. I just wanted to help him find his voice again, even if it started with movement." At that moment, Elijah appeared from backstage, walking slowly but with more purpose than Catherine had seen in months. When he saw his mother, he didn't retreat as usual. Instead, he approached Maria and took her hand. "Mommy, did you see what I learned?" His voice was barely above a whisper, fragile as glass, but it was there. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "Elijah, sweetheart, But Elijah turned back to Maria, communicating something through simple sign language Maria had taught him. Maria smiled and signed back, then turned to Catherine and typed, "He wants to show you the piece we've been working on. Would that be okay?" After Elijah returned backstage to prepare, Maria turned back to Catherine with renewed determination. She typed rapidly, Mrs. Monroe, I know you see me as just a janitor, and maybe that's all I am to you, but your son is finding himself again, and deep down, you know it. Finding himself? Catherine typed back bitterly. You saw him whisper a few words. I see Elijah every day. Maria's response came swiftly. For 8 months, I've seen him every night. I've seen him cry silently when he thinks no one is watching. I've seen him struggling to make you notice him. I've seen a brilliant, sensitive boy who only needs someone who truly believes he can heal. Maria's words echoed in Catherine's chest like an accusation. When was the last time she had really looked at Elijah? Not just at his silence, but at what he was trying to communicate through that silence? My methods may not be as clinical as the professionals you've hired, Maria continued typing. But they come from lived experience and unconditional love, and sometimes that makes all the difference. Catherine felt a turbulent mix of emotions. On one hand, her wounded pride resisted the idea that a janitor could achieve what expensive therapists and renowned specialists could not. On the other hand, she couldn't deny the results she was seeing in Elijah. But there was still another mystery that intrigued her. How did Maria manage to maintain such dedication after working all night cleaning the theater? What deep motivation drove her to invest so much time and energy in her employer's son? In the following days, Catherine began to observe Maria differently. No longer as a simple employee, but as an enigma that needed to be understood. She discreetly checked the theater's security footage, officially to review safety protocols, but in reality to understand Maria's activities with Elijah. What she discovered through the recordings left her deeply disturbed, though not in the way she expected. Maria arrived 90 minutes before her shift every evening, unpaid, to work with Elijah. She stayed 2 hours past her official end time, helping him develop emotional expression through movement. On her supposed days off, she voluntarily appeared to continue the improvised theater therapy sessions. Catherine discovered that Maria had transformed a storage room backstage into a sort of creative sanctuary. She used costumes from old productions to help Elijah explore different characters. Props became tools for storytelling. Even lighting equipment was repurposed to create emotional atmospheres for their work. But there was something more intriguing. Maria kept a detailed journal, not written but documented through drawings and photographs, recording Elijah's progress, which exercises unlocked which emotions, how his body language changed. It was more comprehensive and insightful than any clinical report Catherine had ever received from professional therapists. One evening, Catherine decided to follow Maria after her shift. She wanted to understand where all that inexplicable dedication came from. Maria took the subway to Brooklyn, then walked 15 blocks to a community theater in a struggling neighborhood. The marquee was weathered. Voices Unheard Theater Collective. Catherine waited across the street, watching through the window. Beside, Maria was the center of attention in a rehearsal space filled with about 20 deaf and hard-of-hearing teenagers. She was directing them in what appeared to be an original production, using the same transformative techniques she applied with Elijah. The young people called her Director Maria and followed her guidance with infectious enthusiasm. Catherine watched Maria help a teenage girl express grief through movement alone. The performance was so powerful, so raw and authentic, that Catherine felt tears streaming down her face from across the street. At that moment, a young woman in her early 20s entered the theater, beautiful, confident, moving with the grace of a trained performer. She approached Maria and embraced her warmly. This had to be Sierra, Maria's daughter, the living proof that Maria's methods worked. Together, they began working with the teenagers on a complex ensemble piece. Sierra performed a solo that left Catherine breathless, a narrative told entirely through physicality and expression, no words needed, yet crystal clear in its emotional truth. Catherine cautiously entered the theater. Maria was sitting in the front row, watching her daughter with unmistakable pride. When she noticed her employer's presence through a reflection, she became visibly tense. Catherine approached slowly, and Maria pulled out her phone with trembling hands. Mrs. Monroe, What are you doing here? Following you? Catherine typed honestly. I wanted to understand why you care so much about Elijah. Maria remained silent for a long moment, watching Sierra guide another performer through a challenging sequence. Finally, she typed, My daughter isn't just my responsibility, Mrs. Monroe. She's my inspiration. When she stopped communicating at 7 and the therapist said she might never open up again, I promised myself I would find a way. And you did, Catherine typed back. Yes, but it wasn't just the exercises and techniques. It was because I never stopped believing in her. I never let her see herself as broken or less than. Maria paused, carefully choosing her next words. And when I see Elijah, I see a boy with the same potential Sierra had, brilliant, sensitive, creative, but surrounded by adults who have given up on him. The words hit Catherine like a slap. Are you accusing me of giving up on my own son? I'm not accusing anyone, ma'am. I'm just saying that Elijah needs someone who believes in the impossible. At that moment, Sierra approached, slightly sweaty from the rehearsal. She signed something to Maria, who smiled and signed back, then typed for Catherine. My daughter wants to know if you're the famous Catherine Monroe. She's seen your shows. Sierra pulled out her own phone and typed, It's an honor to meet you, Ms. Monroe. Your production of The Glass Menagerie changed my life. It showed me that theater could communicate truth beyond words. Catherine was taken aback. She typed, Thank you. That means more than you know. Your performance just now was extraordinary. Sierra smiled and typed back, My mom taught me everything. She showed me that silence isn't emptiness. It's just a different language. Once I learned to speak through movement, I found my voice in ways I never expected. Catherine looked at Maria with a new expression, a mixture of admiration and shame. She began to understand that she had misjudged not only Maria's abilities, but also her motivations. Maria wasn't trying to replace Catherine or prove anything. She simply saw in Elijah an opportunity to share the miracle she had achieved with her own daughter. But there was still another mystery that nagged at Catherine. During her observations, she had noticed that Maria sometimes carried a worn portfolio when she left the theater late at night. Where did she go with that portfolio, and what did it contain? The following week, Catherine decided to follow Maria during one of her mysterious late-night excursions. It was nearly midnight when Maria left the theater with her usual portfolio tucked under her arm. Catherine discreetly followed her to a specialized arts library in Manhattan that stayed open late for researchers. Through the window, Catherine saw something that left her completely speechless. Maria was in a private study room, the portfolio open to reveal detailed choreographic notations, director's notes, and what appeared to be academic papers. She was working on what looked like a master's thesis, surrounded by books on theater therapy, trauma-informed performance, and nonverbal communication. The portfolio also contained letters, dozens of them, all rejection letters from theater programs, directing positions, and therapy clinics. Each one cited the same barriers: insufficient formal credentials, lack of traditional experience, not the right fit for our institution. Catherine watched Maria work for over an hour, meticulously documenting her methods with Elijah and the teenagers at the community theater. She was building a comprehensive methodology, trying to legitimize her work through self-directed research and documentation. At that moment, Catherine understood the full picture. Maria wasn't just helping Elijah out of kindness. She was fighting to prove that her approach had value, that her years of lived experience and innovative methods deserved recognition in a field that had systematically locked her out. The next day, Catherine confronted Maria once again, but this time with a completely different approach. Maria, I need to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer, Catherine typed, finding her in the lighting booth. Do you have any formal training in theater or therapy? Maria stopped adjusting a spotlight, her hands trembling slightly. She pulled out her phone and typed, Mrs. Monroe, I can explain. No need to explain. You need to answer me. Maria sighed deeply, as if preparing for a confession she had been holding back for a long time. She typed slowly, Yes, ma'am. I have a bachelor's degree in theater arts from City College and a certificate in drama therapy from a community program. I studied while working full-time and raising Sierra alone. The revelation hit Catherine like a wave. You're trained in theater and drama therapy, and you're working as a janitor. Why? Maria's response came with a mixture of sadness and resignation. Because no one hires a deaf black woman from Brooklyn without MFA credentials or connections to the Broadway establishment. I sent applications to dozens of theaters, therapy centers, educational programs. The answer was always the same, not what we're looking for. Catherine felt a pang of shame, recognizing her own contribution to this exclusionary system. How many times had she hired directors and therapists based solely on pedigree and connections rather than actual ability? So you accepted working here as a janitor, knowing you could be practicing your craft? I needed the job, ma'am. And when I saw Elijah, I thought maybe I could help quietly, without anyone knowing. I didn't imagine I would be discovered. At that moment, Elijah appeared in the lighting booth, walking with newfound confidence. He went directly to Maria and signed something Catherine had learned meant, "Thank you." Then he turned to his mother and spoke clearly, "Mommy, Miss Maria helped me remember how to use my voice. Can I show you what else I learned?" Catherine froze. Her son had just spoken to her in complete sentences for the first time in 2 years. This historic breakthrough had happened thanks to someone she had dismissed and undervalued for months. Maria knelt to Elijah's level and signed something that made him smile. Then she typed for Catherine. He wants to perform the piece we've been working on. It's about a boy who loses his way in the dark and finds light through movement and courage. Catherine approached her son, knelt down, and hugged him with an intensity she hadn't shown since Marcus died. Tears ran down her face as she held Elijah, feeling the life and energy radiating from him, qualities she feared had died with his father. "I'm sorry, baby," Catherine whispered. "I'm sorry for not seeing you, for not being present. I'm sorry I couldn't help you the way Maria did." Elijah pulled back slightly and looked at his mother with wise beyond his years eyes. "It's okay, Mommy. Miss Maria says sometimes grown-ups get lost, too. She says you were lost in your own silence." The simple truth from her 8-year-old son broke something open in Catherine's heart. She looked up at Maria, who was watching the emotional scene with tears streaming down her own face, and typed with trembling fingers, "I owe you more than an apology. You gave my son back to me. You gave me back to myself." Maria started to step away discreetly, but Catherine called out and gestured for her to stay. She typed, "Don't leave. I need you to understand something. You are far more than I deserve to have in my theater. And now I need to find a way to make up for all the injustice I've been blind to." 6 months later, Maria could hardly believe the transformation her life had taken. Catherine had not only officially promoted her to director of theater therapy at the Imperial Theater with a salary that reflected her true value, but had also invested heavily in launching the Monroe Garcia Theater Therapy Institute, a comprehensive program offering free drama therapy to traumatized children throughout New York City. The once-dismissed janitor now had a staff of 5 working under her guidance: 2 drama therapists, a child psychologist, a movement specialist, and her own daughter Sierra as lead instructor. The program served over 100 children, many of whom had experienced trauma similar to Elijah's. But the changes didn't stop there. Catherine had stepped back from producing to dedicate 3 days a week to the Institute, working directly with families and advocating for increased funding for arts-based trauma therapy. For the first time in years, she had found purpose beyond professional achievement. Elijah, in turn, had become a completely different child. He not only spoke freely now, but had developed a passion for performance. He participated in the Institute's youth ensemble and had even written his own short play about grief and healing. One special afternoon, the Monroe Garcia Institute hosted its first public showcase. The Imperial Theater was packed with families, educators, therapists, and media. Catherine stood backstage with Maria, both women watching the children prepare for their performances. "I never thought I'd be standing here," Maria signed, with Catherine now fluent enough to understand. "I never thought I'd find my way back to what really matters," Catherine signed back. "Thank you for showing me." Elijah was chosen to open the showcase. He walked onto the stage with confidence, no trace of the silent, withdrawn boy from a year ago. He stood center stage, took a deep breath, and began. "My name is Elijah Monroe," he said, his voice clear and strong. "A little over a year ago, I lost my voice. Not because I couldn't speak, but because I forgot how to feel safe enough to try. Today I want to tell you how I learned that silence isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a different kind of conversation." Elijah proceeded to perform a piece that combined spoken word with movement, a technique Maria had pioneered. He told his story simply but powerfully. He spoke about the accident, the fear that trapped his voice, and how Miss Maria showed him that communication happens in infinite ways. "Miss Maria taught me that my body could speak when my mouth couldn't. That movement could express what words couldn't capture. That being deaf or silent or different doesn't mean being broken," Elijah said, his eyes finding Maria in the wings. "She taught me that healing happens when someone believes in you more than you believe in yourself." The audience erupted in emotional applause. Catherine felt pride unlike anything she had experienced, even at her biggest Broadway openings. Not just pride for her son, but also for having had the humility to recognize her mistakes and the wisdom to value Maria. After the showcase, Maria approached Elijah with tears in her eyes. She signed, "You were magnificent, champion. I'm so proud of you." "Miss Maria, I have a surprise," Elijah said, then gestured to his mother. Catherine stepped forward holding an envelope. She handed it to Maria, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside was an official document, a full scholarship for a Master of Fine Arts in Theater Directing at NYU, along with an endowed position as artist-in-residence at the Monroe Garcia Institute. "I can't accept this," Maria signed, overwhelmed. "You can, and you will," Catherine signed back firmly. "This isn't charity, Maria. It's recognition. It's justice for everything you've achieved and everything you're going to achieve." Sierra, who had been watching from the audience, rushed on stage and embraced her mother. "Mom, you always told me I could accomplish anything. Now it's your turn to believe in the impossible." James, Catherine's assistant director who had supported Maria from the beginning, joined them on stage. "Maria, we've also established the Voices Unheard Theater Fund. It will provide grants, training, and opportunities specifically for deaf and hard-of-hearing theater artists. You'll be on the founding board." 2 years later, the Monroe Garcia Theater Therapy Institute had become a national model for trauma-informed arts education. Maria had completed her MFA with honors and had published a groundbreaking methodology that combined theater, movement, and trauma therapy. Her approach, which she called embodied voice recovery, revolutionized traditional therapy by recognizing that healing doesn't always begin with words. It begins with safety, connection, and the courage to express in whatever language feels possible. Elijah, now 11 years old, had become the Institute's youth ambassador. He traveled to schools, hospitals, and community centers, sharing his story and demonstrating how the arts could heal invisible wounds. His friendship with Maria remained unbreakable, and he considered her his second mother. Catherine had learned the most important lesson of her life, that true value isn't measured by credentials, fame, or power, but by the ability to see and nurture potential in others, especially when the world has turned away. Maria had arrived at the Imperial Theater as a janitor, overlooked and underestimated. But she revealed herself as a master teacher, a healing presence, and a reminder that sometimes the most transformative gifts come from those we least expect, wrapped in quiet dedication and offered with unconditional love. Sierra had gone on to found the first deaf-led theater company on Broadway, producing works that centered deaf artistry and challenged the hearing world's assumptions about communication and performance. The Monroe Garcia family's story, for that's what they had become. A chosen family bound by healing rather than blood became a powerful reminder that sometimes we need to lose our voice to discover new ways of speaking, and that life's greatest teachers often arrive disguised as the people we almost overlooked. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to receive more inspiring content showing how compassion and courage can transform lives in the most unexpected ways.